Hey art people, let's go ahead and get this drawing shaded here. So we're just gonna be using our normal drawing pencil here to add some shading to it to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. That's pretty much the point of adding shading and shadow and all that good stuff. So here you can see a picture of the Capitol building on the slideshow down here. We did more this version of it where it doesn't have all the extensions on the left and the right side, but just that main section. So we did a version of that. Here's another picture of it. So we've got some different trees in real life. And I thought we could do our shading based off of this picture. This is from 1839. And this shows light source, which is something that you want to keep in mind when you're doing shading. So as you can see here, the light source in this case is going to be the sun, but any light source, whenever it hits an object, in this case a building, it's going to be brighter on the part that is closest to the light source. So as you can see here, the sun would be over in this area, right? And so this left side of the dome, this left side of the dome is a little bit brighter. You can see this has a shadow on the right side as well. Okay, so all that being said, let's go ahead and get our pencil and get our paper and get started with our shading here. So what we can do is start with the dome. So we can just put our pencil on the right here. We can pretend that the sun is on the left, just like in our reference image here. And what you're going to do is just go on the right side here and just really softly. You don't have to push down very hard, but we're just going to start adding some shading on the right side of this curve here. And as I get closer to the left, this line here, I'm just going more gently. So as I go more gently, and my pencil's kind of off the paper a little bit more, then it's going to be a lot lighter. So if you push down a little bit harder and are a little bit more firmer with the pencil, it's going to be a little darker. And as you're more gentle and your pencil is kind of more floating off of the paper, it gets a little bit lighter. And then another thing you can do to make the right side darker is going over it a couple times, like this. So the more you go over it, also that's another way to add darkness to it. So I think that looks good for this one, and I'm gonna move to this second wedge that we have here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So this isn't an exact perfect replica of the Capitol building, but it's a really good kind of kid version, older kid version of the Capitol building. So it works really well for us. So I'm just doing the same thing on the left here. So you can see that, and all these lines, if I make it darker, it does start to look a little bit more three-dimensional, right? It starts to pop. So just go ahead and do that. And then again, if you want it to be a little darker on the right side, you can just go over it again. And honestly, a lot of shading, obviously there's a technique to it in that you need to know how light source works. So again, this is something that you'll see a lot, this type of picture, if you end up doing a lot more art in your life. You'll see this a lot because you do have to know about when the light hits something, it gets brighter. And then on the other side of it, it's darker because it doesn't have the light touching it. So you can't see it as much. And then this is called a cast shadow. So on the other side of the light source, you have your shadow. So there is knowledge you need to know, but as far as actually creating the shadow and the shading, that is something that takes practice. So if you're feeling like yours looks very like liney and scribbly and mine's really soft and you can't see all the pencil lines, and don't feel discouraged by that. It's easier to control the pencil the more you practice, like your hands just aren't used to being that gentle with the pencil and a piece of paper. So don't feel discouraged if yours isn't looking just like mine. And also, as I get over to this left side, I'm going to start making these wedges a lot lighter because remember, we're pretending that the sun is over on the left. So I'm getting a lot lighter with these. I'm not pushing that dark value as much. Okay. And as far as talking about shadows and shading, there's just a few terms that you need to know. There's a lot of terms out there about shading and shadow, but all you need to know for right now is essentially the word value. And what value means is the lightness or the darkness of a color. So when you're talking about shading or watching a video about shading, they're going to say this has a dark value, this has a light value. So all they mean is it's darker or lighter. Okay, so on the right side, we're going to have a darker value because we're just pretending that the sun is over here on the left. So it's going to be darker over here, and then on this side it's going to be a little bit lighter. So that is the dome there. And again, the dome is not exactly like that in real life. In any of the photographs, this older picture from the 1800s or the more recent ones, it's not exactly like that, but it is, you know, it definitely is similar to that. Okay, so now we can actually do our shading on this second area here. And you'll see that in our picture here, wherever there's an arch or any sort of like area that's behind some sort of structure, like a column or an arch like this, it's really dark in there, right? So we can go ahead and just make these areas inside the arches gray, because the light can't really get in there. And so that's why these are more gray. So we're just going to fill these guys in. And again, if you're going outside the line a little bit, you know, don't be frustrated, because it just takes practice. The more you draw and the more you work on doing things that have shading, the better you'll get at being able to draw lightly. You know, as of right now, whenever you write your name, you're not worried about how hard you're pushing. You know, you might have a really naturally heavy hand. You might push down really hard. And so then when you come to shade, it's like, oh, your hand's not used to that. So it's like struggling a little bit. You know, don't be hard on yourself. Or maybe it's really hard for you to get these dark values because you have a natural like light hand. So all these light values, these light grays are easy for you. But then whenever it comes time to do a really dark shadow, maybe that's tricky for you to push down so hard without, you know, tearing your paper. So, you know, just remember, like, all of us artists were there once, and it's just practice, and you can do it, and don't be discouraged. Just remember, art's really about having fun. Okay, so we've got our shading in there, and then what else we can do is we can make this just a lighter gray. So we can just very gently go across this, and we can even go straight over those little openings. I'm just going up and down here like so, and now I might go this way just so it's really soft. Okay, there, a little something like that. Okay, so now we can move on to this section down here, and we can, let's see, we can look at these different pictures to get some inspiration as far as how we want to do it. So yeah, we can just make it, what we can do is we can add another line up at the top here, and then we can do these vertical lines going down, like this picture here has their drawing of the White House doing. And then we have something we can shade inside of. So we can shade inside every other of these rectangles here. So that's one. And then we could skip the next box and then shade in the box after that. Okay. And then skip over that. Do this shading here, kind of like in this picture that we're looking at right now that we're referencing. They have their shading with blue. We can do that with the gray here. I'll just put some music on while I finish that up. Okay, and then what we can do now is the same thing that we did kind of right here. We can actually have this top rectangle, we can leave it very light. So almost keeping it blank, but just adding a tiny, tiny bit. Because what's really nice in drawings is when there's a contrast. And a contrast is just when one shade or value looks different than the other. So as of right now, this here and this here don't have much of a contrast, so they kind of blend together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another layer of value on this one above it. So that way it's just a slightly darker value. And then it pops a little bit. And another thing I can do if I want to lighten a value, I can just very gently put my eraser on top of it. I don't want to erase all of it, but just kind of pick up some of that pencil. And now it's a little bit lighter. So that looks pretty cool, right? And then we can shade these columns, these white columns. Instead of leaving them white, we can add a little shadow underneath each of them. Like that. That's being cast from this rectangle here. So a little dark there, and then just make it go lighter all the way down. Like so. Okay. So something like that. So you know, it's starting to look less like a cartoon as well when you add your shading. If you do your shading like this, that is. If you do a shading where it gradually moves from one value to another, there is a type of shading that is more cartoon style, and that's called cell shading. And that's where each of the values is split up like in harsh lines. And then it still has that cartoon look, but we're turning ours into more of realism, more realistic. Okay, my dogs are... Leo, leave her alone. My dogs are under my table. I'll show you guys. If I can lift up this thing, you can see under my table. I'll show you guys my dogs. They're underneath here. You guys see that big furry thing? That's my dog Leo, and he's bothering my little dog Shelby. She's like, I don't want to cuddle with you. Here, look at this. I'll move this slideshow. She's over on this side. See her? She's like, I don't want to cuddle with you. That's why she was growling. Okay. All right. All right, back to work. Took a little break to look at doggos. All right, back to work here. So, yeah, I think that we can keep this one very light. This next rectangle down, just like we did with this rectangle here. I think that would look nice. And then let's look at this. Let's look at this reference image here and see if they've got some sort of shading right underneath this. I'm trying to figure out exactly what these rectangles are representing. I think that they're windows, and it looks like in our reference image the windows are pretty dark. So we'll go ahead and we can fill these in with a dark value. And just so you guys know, you don't have to take all of my advice if I say, okay, and then shade this in, you know. You don't have to. If you want to experiment and try something else, like if you want to try keeping the windows bright and see how that looks, that's fine. It's okay to experiment and try your own way of doing things. Okay, so then if you wanted, again, like I said, you can make this your own. You don't have to follow all my instructions exactly. For instance, you could add windows under here if you wanted to make it look more like the real capital here. In this version, there's not this big gap here. But you can add these little square windows here, and it looks like there's little arches above the square windows, which is really pretty. I like that a lot, actually. I think what I'm going to do is just that. I think I'm actually going to add those little squares in there. So, square. I'm just going to go all the way across with these squares. It looks like there's 5 on each side in our reference, so I'll try to make it similar to that. But you don't have to. Like I said in the last video, we are calling this the Capitol building, but we can pretend that we were hired as architects to do a remodeling of the Capitol building. So this can kind of be like our Capitol building inspired design. Like I said in the last video, like if you want windows that are hearts or stars or whatever, I want you guys to know that you can do that. Okay, this is our version of the Capitol building, right? So we've got some arches there. And then I think I will go ahead and shade those in, and I'll put some music on while we work on this. Okay, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a shadow underneath these arches. So I'm just very gently going to draw under these arches like this. And then as I get further away from the arches down to this rectangle, I'm going to be more and more gentle to make it lighter and lighter. So I might go over the pencil a couple times up towards these arches, and then as I get further down, I'm just going really gently. I'm not doing a lot of layers down there because I don't want a lot of this gray to get down there, just a little bit of gray. And I think this is a good time to let you guys know that this medium, which medium is kind of like the art supplies you use, but medium means the art supplies that's used but not the tools. So, for instance, like if someone were to look at a painting and say, what medium is that? You would say it's paint. That's the stuff that was put on the canvas. The paintbrush is not the medium. It's just supplies that you use to put the paint on there. So anyway, the medium that what it's actually called, if you do a drawing, you wouldn't actually say like, oh, it's pencil. You would actually say it's graphite. That's this gray stuff that's inside of the pencil. So sometimes if you're watching a drawing video, especially if it's about shading, they might say, oh, you want to go over it with a couple layers of graphite. So I just wanted to let you guys know that so you weren't confused if you were to watch a video at home about shading. So graphite is the stuff that's in this. And if you were to go to a museum or an art gallery and you were to look at a drawing and wanted to know what they made it with, it's not going to say pencil. It would say graphite. So I just wanted you guys to know what that meant so that you wouldn't be like confused if you went out to a museum or a gallery and it said, oh, this is a graphite piece of artwork. Like, I don't know what that is. Well, now you guys know. It's just the gray stuff inside of pencils. And colored pencils are not graphite. That's completely different. They actually will say colored pencils for that. But for normal gray, this stuff here that's coming out of these pencils, this is graphite. But gray colored pencils are not graphite. Like this, for instance, this is a mechanical colored pencil. I just had it next to me. This is not graphite inside of this. This is a different pigment, and all different brands of colored pencils use different materials to make the color pigment, the pigment stick inside the pencil. So that's probably why we just, for colored pencils, just say colored pencils because all sorts of brands use different sorts of things. Whereas drawing pencils, those are all going to be graphite. So like in middle school, you might get to use a whole range of graphite pencils that are different darknesses and lightnesses. Like here in elementary school, we just use these number 2 pencils and they're like medium. But in middle school, you might get to use some really dark ones and some really light ones too. But it's okay because as you can see, we can actually make a lot of different values just with this normal pencil here. So you don't really need like the fancy pencils to do a good drawing. But the fancy pencils are really fun. If you really like art and you're trying to figure out what you want for Christmas or a birthday, definitely could say drawing pencils. Because if you get a little drawing pencil set from Michael's or Hobby Lobby, then they'll have some really dark gray ones and some light gray ones and some medium gray ones. And it is fun. Okay, so I just went and did like a gray layer above this as well. And again, I'm just making it darker every time it's at the top, because right underneath these sections, the light can't really hit it. And then this is a really good opportunity for us. We can actually do a cast shadow on this roof. So we can make all of this kind of darker on this side, because we're pretending that the sun is here. And so if the sun is here and hitting this area, then the sun can't shine over here where the sun don't shine, right? Drawing where the sun don't shine. So we can actually turn this all really dark over here by using pencil pressure, which means how hard you push, and by using layers. Those are the ways that we create value. So that looks pretty cool, right? And then, I mean, this whole side of the Capitol can be darker because it's over on the right side. It's further away from the sun. So we could even add an extra layer to literally this entire side. See? All right, that's a pretty long video, so I think I'll do the rest of it in the, I think I'll go ahead and be done with this video, and I'll do some more shading in the next one. But hope you guys had fun. This is kind of like a little introduction to shading. You guys did fantastic, and I'll see you in the next video. We'll work on this some more. Thanks for watching.